Acts 21, verse 27 to 36. The scene unfolds in Jerusalem during the final days of the temple's standing order, a time charged with tension, expectation, and transition. The Apostle Paul the Apostle enters the temple, not as one opposed to Israel, but as one who has proclaimed the fulfillment of all that the temple anticipated. Yet what is fulfilled is often misunderstood by those still holding to the shadow. Image. When the 7 days were nearly completed, Jews from Asia stirred up the whole crowd and laid hands on Paul. Their accusation was not rooted in truth, but in perception, shaped by zeal, without recognition of fulfillment. They cried out that he taught against the people, the law, and this place. Yet the very message he carried was not destruction, but completion, the arrival of what the law and the prophets had long pointed toward. They supposed he had brought Greeks into the temple, defiling the holy place. This assumption reveals the lingering boundary between Jew and Gentile in their minds, though that dividing wall had already been rendered obsolete in the work that had been accomplished. What they guarded physically had already been surpassed spiritually. The entire city was moved, and the people ran together. They seized Paul and dragged him out of the temple, and immediately the doors were shut. The closing of the temple doors is not merely a detail of urgency, it is a sign. The system represented within those walls was nearing its appointed end. What once served as the meeting place between God and man was giving way to something greater, something not confined to stone and structure. As they sought to kill him, news came to the tribune of the cohort that all Jerusalem was in confusion. At once, he took soldiers and centurions and ran down to them. The presence of Roman authority interrupts the chaos, not to preserve the temple order, but to restrain the violence of a people unable to perceive the transition taking place in their midst. When they saw the tribune and the soldiers, they stopped beating Paul. Then the tribune came up and arrested him and ordered him to be bound with 2 chains. Without knowing it, they fulfilled what had already been spoken, that bonds awaited him. Yet these chains were not marks of defeat. They were instruments through which the message would continue to advance. The tribune inquired who he was and what he had done. But among the crowd, some shouted one thing and some another. Confusion dominated the scene. Where fulfillment is not recognized, clarity gives way to disorder. The inability to discern what had been accomplished resulted in a multitude of conflicting accusations. Unable to learn the facts because of the uproar, he ordered Paul to be brought into the barracks. And when he came to the steps, he was actually carried by the soldiers because of the violence of the crowd. The very one they rejected was lifted above the chaos, borne away from the fury that could not comprehend him. The mob followed, crying out, "Away with him!" echoing words once directed at another who stood in fulfillment before the same city. The pattern repeats, rejection of what fulfills what was promised. In this moment, 2 realities stand in contrast. On one side, a system still clung to, defended with fervor, yet already fulfilled and fading. On the other, a message carried by Paul, declaring that what was anticipated had arrived, and that access to God was no longer mediated through temple rituals, but established through a finished work. The chaos in Jerusalem reflects the broader transition of the age. The old covenant order, centered in the temple, was passing away. Not through human force, but because its purpose had been completed. What remained was not the continuation of the old, but the revelation of the new, unshaken, not bound to a place, and not dependent on the works of the law. Paul stands at the center of this moment, not as an enemy of Israel, but as a witness to its fulfillment. The accusations against him reveal a misunderstanding of fulfillment as opposition. Yet what he proclaimed was not against the law, it was the realization of everything the law had anticipated. Thus, the scene is not merely one of conflict, but of transition. The temple doors close, the crowd rages, the apostle is bound, and yet the message moves forward, unchained, unconfined, and fully established.